Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Paul.
I wasn't sure. I was trying to do sort of can colors. I wasn't sure, like, did I have to do the white cotton shirt or whatever? So, but
I know. If only we were really there.
yes, 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 yes. So we were asked to kind of take a different route than the last panel, which was really asked to have a conversation about marketing leadership. And so Val and I got together last week, and what we realized is we really can't separate the pandemic and the past 15 months from a conversation of marketing leadership right now. It's inextricably intertwined, and so that's what we're going to talk about for the next 30 minutes or so is about marketing leadership, experiences through the pandemic, and what we've learned. And we sort of came up with the title of two wins and a loss, right? Two things that we won because of the pandemic, and one thing that we felt that we lost, and we want to try to get back. And that's going to be our discussion for today. So first, Val, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you being here today, and it's been great to get to know you throughout this process.
Same. I'm excited to be here.
So just to begin, I found this super interesting, and they just kind of alluded to it, that you're the newly appointed Chief Marketing Officer of Headspace. So why don't we start there, meaning you've been in the position for only three and a half months right now?
Exactly.
So that means that you have interviewed, joined an executive leadership team, and evaluated your brand all during a virtual time period.
Are you calling me crazy, Paul?
I'm not calling you crazy, but I will ask, what were you thinking and how did you get through this? So why don't we start there and talk a little bit about your story about having to make a jump as a senior leader and really, assess a marketing operation in a very unnatural situation from what we've all grown accustomed to.
Yeah, for sure. And you don't have to call me crazy. I'll call myself crazy. I remember when this whole thing started, a year and a half ago with the pandemic, and thinking to myself, okay, this is not the time to make a change. I was previously at Hulu and had members joining my team virtually. And I remember really empathizing and doing the best that I could to onboard them, but then also immediately thinking to myself, gosh, I would never want to be in their shoes. Trying to immerse yourself in a new organization, a new brand, a new business completely virtually, let alone at a leadership position, just felt completely insane to me. But the irony of it all is it's also the pandemic that I think brought me towards Headspace and towards the mission of Headspace, and gave me the courage and the passion to really make the leap. I think, over the past year, we've all probably done a lot of self-reflection around what our values are and what really matters to us and how we want to spend our time. And I think I realized more than ever that I want to work on a brand and work on a product that I am deeply passionate about and feel super connected to the mission. And, our mission at Headspace is to improve the health and happiness of the world. I think I challenge you to find a better mission than that. It's a pretty great reason to get out of bed in the morning. So even though the pandemic and the circumstances of quarantine made it kind of crazy to think about taking on this type of new leadership position, it also made what we do at Headspace so powerful and so special to me, and the type of opportunity that I couldn't pass up. You mentioned, how do you sort of onboard virtually and get to know the brand and the product. And I'll say I started immersing myself in every way that I could. I actually became a heavy user of Headspace during the pandemic, and so was intimately familiar with our content and with our product, and a huge fan of it. When I started interviewing and preparing for the job, also looked at, if I can't just get in a room with people and get to know the culture and the essence that way, what are the other ways I can do it? And luckily there were a few, different tools at our disposal. We do a great amount of off-platform content partnerships. You may have seen our shows on Netflix, or we do some great podcasts. So I had a very sort of multimedia approach to absorbing and picking up everything Headspace was putting out there. I studied the history of it. I read the book that our founder, Andy Puddicombe, wrote about his own journey of being a former Buddhist monk to trying to make mental health and wellness more accessible to the world through Headspace. So I try to do my homework as best I could. And then when I started, so many Zooms is really the answer, and they don't replace the face-to-face one-on-ones and the coffee walk and talks. But I do find that they're better than nothing. So many Zooms, so many one-on-ones with my colleagues and my team members all around the world is really how I've been approaching it.
So it really sounds like you knew the company as a user, and a lot of your process was to match sort of the experience of the brand with the internal that you were discovering to see if it fit, or else where the gaps were between the two.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah. So now that you've started, right? So you're now a week into the job. Every leader comes in with their system, their process of how you evaluate the operation and how you think about customers and how you bring things together. How did you think about getting started with your new team, leading a new team, introducing yourself to marketers who are clearly passionate as well, right? I think just given your mission and your brand, your team is probably just as passionate about it as you are. How do you put that system in place virtually? And I guess the corollary as you answer is, what had to change? What things would you normally have done in a quote unquote pre-pandemic or normal time frame that you had to modify now, just given that everything was so remote?
Yeah, I'd say two things. So thinking about taking on any new position like this, I sort of go in two different directions. The first is about how do I put a stake in the ground around the culture and the team dynamic. I'm a big believer you got to get that right before you can get anything else right. And that's really difficult to do virtually. The phrase I always gravitate towards is warm candor, and how do I create an environment where maybe radical candor, the cold hard truth can be a little bit too jarring, but if you how do we create an environment where people feel like they can be honest and direct and push back and have that healthy tension, but do it in a way that's steeped in respect and kindness. So you create that psychological safety. That I would say my sort of pandemic tweak to building that culture was over indexing and modeling that myself. When you're on a screen, it's really easy to sort of lean back and slack instead of speak up, or not be fully honest and vulnerable. And I tend to be a pretty transparent leader regardless, but have found over the past few months, I've just been even more so of, being honest about when I don't know what I'm doing, or when I have questions, or when I'm feeling overwhelmed, or when I need help. And really trying to get my team members to lean into that as well. So that's sort of on the culture side of things. And then the second is more around, okay, getting down to business and the systems and the operating mechanisms that we need to, put a stake in the ground around our strategy, and then build a plan to execute against it. And that has been probably even more difficult, I would say. Google Docs I've never relied more heavily on Google Docs and frameworks, and figuring out the stuff that gets lost in translation when you don't have the in-person or the body language or whatever it may be. How do we use these other tools as much as possible to create alignment? So that's where I'd say frameworks and Google Docs, and leaning on our project management organization to help me do all of that and help me bring it together has been my pandemic crutch, if you will.
Yeah, there's a lot. I think everyone knows this, right? There's a lot of nonverbal context that gets lost, and some of that nonverbal, that slight gasp of hesitancy, or that someone in the back of the room that you would normally see that wants to speak up, but maybe they're a little shy, that you would call on and say, give me your idea. Let's talk about your idea. Yep. A lot of that has been lost when it comes to managing creativity, right? Yes. Marketing, managing things, and those ideas, right? Those back of the room ideas, those ones that maybe somebody's too shy to put out in front of the group to let the group build on, it's been a casualty of the pandemic. And I know just even myself trying to figure out a way to get back that you know, kind of free-form collaboration around an idea concept has been very difficult.
Yep.
So,
and honestly, from a marketer's perspective, I've been thinking a lot about with my team, what's the channel diversification? Like
yeah.
you said, introverts don't do so well on big group Zoom meetings, but is there a different method? Is it email? Is it, you know, different pin boards? Like everyone has their own, just like everyone has their own communication style in person. I think everyone has their own communication style virtually. And how can I make sure that I am creating those avenues and connections for each variation?
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect lead into our first win during the pandemic. As we you know, as we talked about beforehand, we realized that we think that, you know, the rest of the organizations inside a company, maybe the pandemic has given them an opportunity to catch up to recognizing the diversity of communication channel needed to create good marketing, right? I think, you know, you talk to anybody who's listening to this, and they're going to say what you just said. What we've experienced is that great ideas come from anywhere, and it's about being able to find them and nurture them in a safe space so that they can grow into something there. So you talked a little bit about different channels for getting different personality types to be able to contribute. What else do you think has changed, right, in managing teams and fostering a safe environment for creative ideas and for exploration to try to get to something great? What has been a win for us? Because when we talked about this, we thought that you know, having an IT department more supportive of different various communication channels was a big win for marketing. So I guess my question for you, right, because we've always needed that. So my question for you is why is that a win? Well, how are you thinking about it? Why is that a win?
Well, I think specifically for marketing and in creative fields, it allows people to bring their individuality and their unique perspectives and their whole authentic selves to the table, which, you know, I would argue is a good thing for any function. But I think particularly in a creative function, when you're trying to, you know, put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and relate with a wide variety of audiences and make sure you're getting those ideas that can come from anywhere. And so I think that's been a real win for us, not just like the channels of communication, but the kind of the merging of your work self with your home self. While it might be uncomfortable for some, I actually think has led to better output and better thinking, because you bring that whole human perspective to your ideation and to the work that we're building together.
Absolutely. There's a little bit more empathy I think we have for the whole human being behind the boat and the screen behind us now as teammates. You know, when we first started talking, you know, you were saying, oh, you know, my daughter's home.
I was going to say, yeah, you met my 2.5-year-old last time. So
he joined the call, right?
Yes.
And, you know, and that was great. That was, you know, that's something that would never happen, you know, and I would only see Val during the day in the office as, you know, marketing leader and whatever. Now I got to see a side of you and understand you a little bit better, right? And I can tell you, you know, my son's joined many calls because he needed help rebooting his iPad in the middle of lessons and things. And those are, you know, seeing the whole teammate helps collaboration. And maybe I love the way you frame authenticity that way, right? I'm my authentic self right now because I am home and I have to live my whole life right now in front of you, even though you only see me in front of this this background. So has that changed the way you run meetings, the way you ask for status, the way you look for things? Have you found yourself approaching those things differently just because you're seeing the whole person?
I have found that there's less of the small talk and more of the real talk, which I really like. And I try to, you know, sort of embrace and encourage, and I feel like we can get to the heart of an issue, whether it's personal or professional, pretty quickly. I think that's been a huge benefit of the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think too, there's something about face-to-face like that we are right now, that even though we're not one-on-one face-to-face,
Yeah.
I know I have your undivided attention, and you know you have mine, right? And if I'm over here doing this, you're going to figure it out very quickly. And so, in some ways, being present during those conversations to provide it. I love the phrase warm candor, and doing that, but be able to give warm candor and knowing that we're both fully present, I think is equally, it's a win,
Yep.
right? Get to those real conversations. How about, and this I think is a really interesting question for you, just given that you had just joined. How about keeping your team connected to the North Star of the company, right? Where you are just learning the ethos yourself, right? And you're a consumer of Headspace and you get it, but really understanding how the exec team operates the business, I imagine you're learning, but yet you have to keep this distributed team aligned to that. So how do you handle that? How have you handled that? And what are you going to take away from that when we go back to our new normal, whatever that is going to make that connection between your team and the North Star of the company that much stronger?
Yeah, I have to say, I feel very lucky actually, because at Headspace, we have such a clear mission and vision and strategy for how we're going to get there, that it didn't take long for me to get up to speed on that. I think our leadership has done an incredible job of getting really sharp and crisp on that. So came in starting with an advantage, and it's just been more about how do I make sure that overarching framework is translating across and through marketing. And I'd say I've always been a big believer in, loosely coupled, highly aligned. How are we all clear on the North Star, but then trust each other to sort of run with their own lanes and march towards that direction. And I think that's just important now more than ever. So, instead of spending the time and energy on the tactical stuff and, the different functional areas of expertise, like let's all spend the extra time making sure we're super crisp on the outcomes that we're moving towards. And then, make sure we're building that trust and empowerment to let people go and deliver them. So, I'd almost put it as saying like focusing more on the outcomes versus outputs, and just making sure you get that outcome part right.
Absolutely. And that's really well said. So let's wrap up this first win and talk about why this is a win for marketing, right? Why is more authenticity? I mean, it's kind of clear, but I think the way I'll ask you about is why is having the rest of the organization facing face-to-faces and having to be clear with organization, what are we going to take from that? What do we get as marketers as we move past the pandemic and into our new reality, right? Besides just, everyone gets a Microsoft Teams account. What else do we get that marketing is going to be able to take forward?
I think one big win that we haven't touched on yet is the ability to collaborate and work together globally. Headspace, we're a global brand and business. I have a number of colleagues in the UK and France, and I feel equally as connected to them as I do to my colleagues who are a couple miles away in Santa Monica. And so I think it's really created unity across the world, and across the organization, and has set marketing up for success within that broader context for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the rest of the organization understanding that value of being able to pull in diversity of thought, diversity of experience from anywhere on the globe and have everyone together on the screen, which is what marketing has always strived for anyway, right?
Yeah.
But having the rest of the organization support that and understand maybe why a leader makes certain decisions about meeting times or why they want to have their offsite someplace or why they need a certain piece of technology. I think that's a huge win overall in support of a more rich, more inclusive brand that you ultimately can present to the marketplace. So I think you brought up our second win before, but let's talk a little bit about this, which is, in being our authentic self, the second win that we talked about is that we have much more understanding of how our customers have changed and the experiences that they are going through with our products. I mean, especially a product like yours, which right now is so relevant given all the stress and noise and chatter that we have to face every day, all on this screen, right? So the second window, I guess, for the team itself is that empathy for the customer. So how have you thought about that now, given sort of the relevancy of your product, and how is your team leveraging that their experiences to be more empathetic in the eyes of the customer?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I've been immersing myself in the brand and our history, I think it's something that we've struggled with a little bit historically, of figuring out how do you talk about something that is so important and so powerful, that can also be, a little bit scary, a little bit
Yeah.
sensitive, depending on your audience. And there's kind of, two main paths we could go in terms of our creative direction, and one is focusing just on the aspirational of the outcome of leverage our brand and our product, and you get to this sort of state of health and happiness and mental wellness, or leaning more into the need states, and what are the problem statements, and what are the moments of crisis and the moments of depression or anxiety or stress and pain that are the reason you come to us in the first place. And I think the reality of it is it's both, and it's a blend of both, because it is the human condition, where we're all kind of going on a continuous journey where you alternate between moments of crisis and moments of thriving and moments of in between. And I think what's so beautiful about Headspace is our product is really there to support and guide you through all of that. So thinking about, from a brand perspective and a marketing perspective, how can we create a platform that encompasses all of that and shows sort of the real human side of life, and the real benefit that our product can bring to it.
It's really interesting as you're talking about this. I didn't think of it this way, but we've all had that shared experience that makes your product relevant to us. And maybe before the pandemic, you're right, it was in silos, or it's something I didn't talk about or bring to work or to my family. I'd look up in private, but it's almost like we've all gotten permission to say, yeah, sometimes it's a little tough, and sometimes we need a moment, and we need some help in that moment to try to reground and center ourselves, and that's pretty unique.
It's incredible. I mean, my perspective is that the pandemic overall, on many fronts, it's not like it's so much brought about a 180 change. It's more that it was the great accelerator, I think, on a lot of fronts. And I think as a society, we were already kind of moving down this path where mental health and wellness was destigmatized. But to your point, this year just brought it really front and center, where more than being destigmatized, I think it's something to be embraced and to be celebrated, kind of in the same way I think physical health and wellness has been in recent years. And we're all realizing that the mental and the emotional side of it is equally important to invest in.
Yeah, and I guess I think as we return to our new normal, having now a foundation to talk about this does change the workplace for the better. It does change our lives better, right? We're talking about leading marketing teams, so I'm using the workplace as an example, but it does change the workplace for the better, because we all have had those moments, and we all maybe have empathy for each other now a bit more. I'm like, hey, try this, or take a moment, or do what you need to do to kind of get your headspace again, right? Get yourself back to where you need to be.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing that we do at Headspace that I love is, and it was born explicitly out of the pandemic, is every other Friday we take what we call a mind day. And so we basically have every other Friday off to focus on your mental health and recover from the Zoom meeting fatigue that's happening Monday through Thursday. And it was, like I said, launched as to help folks cope and deal with the working from home pandemic. But we've decided we're not changing that when we go back into the office, because it's just become such a critical breath of fresh air to, again, reconnect with your whole self, also to just think and create that space for creativity and ideation. And make sure we're getting the most out of the face-to-face Zoom meetings when we have them, but then also building in bandwidth and space to step away. So that's just one example that I think we'll carry with us.
Love that. So we talked about our two wins. One, one is more empathy for the customer, and two is really authenticity and the ability to pull diversity of ideas in from everywhere. And those things have been, and like you said, accentuated during the pandemic. Let's talk a little bit about the one thing that we think we lost a bit during the pandemic. And something that I found interesting, I wrote it down when we spoke before this, was you had said, it's been hard for me to feel the energy of a great idea. And I thought that was such a great phrase that every marketer would relate to, because we've all been in the room and in those discussions, and somebody says something at one point in the discussion and you go, wait a minute, that's what we're looking for. And then the momentum builds and you finally get to that point. And it has been tough, right? And so I guess, why is that, why is feeling that energy important? And then I guess the corollary to that is, and while it's a bit obvious, I'd love to hear your take on this, is what's missing from Zooms, especially as a leader who you probably never had that in-person moment with your new team yet. And those moments from a team building perspective are incredibly important when the team finally rallies together around an idea and creates something. So talk to me a little bit about that, how do you manage the team? What are you missing on Zoom? And how have you compensated a bit in that, since you haven't been able to create those moments yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it right. There's something about being in the same room and building on top of each other, on top of each other's ideas, that leads to an output that's greater than just the sum of its parts. And I, quite frankly, I'm not sure I've yet been able to sort of recreate that magic virtually. I think what it comes down to is we're marketers, we're creators, we're storytellers. And even when you're in that like ideation brainstorm phase, you're telling stories to each other, and your tools are severely limited because you don't have the body language, you don't have all the nonverbal cues, you don't have the sort of give and take that happens between two people, more people, in the same way. And so I'll be honest, I don't think I figured out what that unlock is, and that right there is why I'm most excited to get back into the office.
Does return to work look for you? Is it like whiteboard on day one, like everyone gather on a whiteboard? What does that look to you like?
I think I said this to you last time. I've definitely never missed a whiteboard. I never thought I'd miss a whiteboard as much as I have this year. Yes, it'll definitely be around a whiteboard, but even more so just like being around a table. And I think that even when you're on a group Zoom, it feels like one to many instead of a true sort of equilibrium. And I kind of have this like fantasy vision of having my entire team all sitting around one table and just seeing where it goes from there. So that'll probably be my day one in the office if I can have my way.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. For that. So when you look out, I'll say February 2023 instead of next year, because maybe there's still a little bit of a tail to this pandemic. But if you look at February 2023 versus February 2020, what's different about how you're operating your team?
I think the main difference will just be so much more flexibility, and whether that's flexibility in terms of where you live, in terms of how often you come into the office, and in terms of, I think even just roles and what we're expecting from roles, because, if you're not sort of physically sitting in an office in a specific box, I think we can be creative about exactly how we tackle certain problems. I honestly don't know is the short answer. We at Headspace, we do a great job of embracing rapid experimentation across all that we do, both business-wise and organizationally. And I think that's probably how we're gonna approach the return to work, is give something a shot and see what works, and then adjust as needed as we go. But I hope, that we take the lessons of what worked and what didn't, and use that to, return to something that is, I don't even want to call it a new routine, because I think part of the new normal is that it's going to be less routine than what we were used to, and just very much not a one size fits all.
Yeah, and I'm looking in. I guess we should mention that we're open for questions if anyone has any questions on here. But I guess last topic of conversation, and I think this is really important. We touched on this a little bit, but when you do return to work, when our teams do get back, they're not coming back from a vacation, right? They're coming back from 15, 18 months where they have gone through enormous change and faced enormous pressures in a way, and just getting back to whatever that new routine looks like, or that new state of flexibility looks like, is yet another change, another shock to the system and to the routine as well. So how are you thinking about that, right? How are you thinking about, I think you mentioned the mind days, which are great ways to help recharge, but how are you thinking about your team and realizing that even though they're back, they may not be able to be fully present yet, right? There's still a period of stress they're going to have to go through, and vacations they're going to want to take, and things your team's going to need to do that they haven't been able to do before they can be fully present again in their jobs.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think the Mind Days are a great tool that we'll be continuing and leaning into. We also have the benefit of we are a brand and a product that is all about being present and mindful, and recognizing that present state of being, and when you need to step back and take a breath, and everything from we offer, and we even do this virtually, but we have every single morning we have a company-wide meditation if you want to participate in it. We try to really sort of embrace the ethos of what we do and practice what we preach. And I will also tell you that I think this moment of time that we're in has connected every employee even further to the mission of what we're doing. And so it gives a lot of focus and a lot of purpose at this moment in time. So it's figuring out how do we pursue that purpose as a team and as a business, while also living that purpose as individuals. Yeah.
You're literally walking the walk, which is amazing. We've got a question. The question is maybe a little more business focused, but I'm going to frame it a little maybe in this conversation. How are you determining where to spend time on emerging technologies? And I guess the question, the way I'll kind of present that to you in the context of our conversation about leading teams is, there's so much opportunity right now, I imagine, for your brand to expand given the renewed emphasis on your core purpose. So how are you exploring, and how are you prioritizing another Netflix show or a TikTok channel or whatever, versus expanding just your customer base through your more traditional means and channels, or how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so I'll answer in two ways. I think the first is back to that ethos of rapid experimentation. That's really how we try to approach everything. And so, figuring out what's kind of like the low lift, quickest test we can run to get a directional indicator on whether something works or not, and whether it resonates. So you'll see us trying a lot of things and then doubling down on the ones that do work. And then I think when we do get to that phase, I'm a big believer in fewer things better. I think particularly for a brand like ours that does have, sort of such clear vision and mission around what we're trying to accomplish, we don't need to be showing up everywhere. We might test a lot of things, but then once we sort of hone in on the ones that really work the most for us and for our brand and for our customers, then how do we go deep and make sure we're delivering the content and the experiences that are really creating value for our members and our future members.
When you talk about what worked the best or works the most, has your evaluation of that changed because of the past 18 months? Meaning, is there a different threshold for what's working than you might have had in February of 2020?
I mean, I will tell you that we saw some crazy responses on things during the past year.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
There's just a natural wave of folks finding you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We saw unexpected responses to some things that I think really, sort of opened our eyes to exactly what the need is and what the demand is. So now it's about figuring out how do we meet that, and how do we meet that as quickly as they're asking for it.
You got to be careful of those year-over-year board slides for the next year, huh?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
But I guess the challenge then is, and you mentioned this a little bit, is you've introduced your brand to customers that may not have sought it out prior.
Yeah.
So how do you become relevant to them so they stick?
Yeah.
Right? When you return back to their new routine, whatever that routine is.
That's exactly it. And one of our key strategies is how do we help people build mental health and wellness routines that last a lifetime. So as everyone's kind of returning to this new normal, how do we make sure that we're a part of that new normal, and not just sort of a flash in the pan, one time exposure, that came as a result of the past year, but really something that can carry them through the rest of their journeys and the rest of their lives. And that's sort of back to this spectrum of, like, there are moments of crisis, but then there are moments of maintenance. And I kind of think about what we do, like we're both the medicine and the vitamin. And so as we're shifting back into the vitamin stage of life for most people collectively, how can we, show how we belong as a partner across that journey?
So to me, it sounds like you found an ideal situation to be able to make that leap, right? From during a pandemic, because you went to a company that really was relevant and authentic at this time period. What advice, hindsight is 2020. What advice would you give to someone else now if they wanted to make a jump? Would you tell them to wait for an in-person meeting? Would you say do it, but here's some things I'd want you to check, and Zoom isn't great, but here's how you could go about doing it? How would you, if it wasn't the ideal situation, which it sounds like you had, how would you advise someone as to whether or not they should make a jump during a quarantine period?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one to answer. It's so, every case is unique. For me, it was just such an incredible serendipitous coming together of, professional ambition and then a product that just so personally resonated at this unique moment in time, where because of the social circumstances, there's just so much opportunity for this brand and this business. I think I had the courage to take the leap because of that unique combination. But without it, I guess I'd say, you just gotta, I guess I'd say maybe the pre-pandemic version of me would say you got to evaluate your risk tolerance and do sort of the cost benefit analysis of the change. And then maybe the post-pandemic version of me says life is short and trust your gut and go for it. Do what you want to do.
Love that. Val, I wish we were sitting on an actual yacht at Cannes, a nice glass of rosé in our hands, having this conversation, being able to look out and see an audience and react to them, and maybe pull some questions out of them themselves. But it's been fantastic to spend this time with you and learn a little bit more about your journey. And I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Maybe next year or 2023, I guess, like you said.
2023, right?
Made me nervous. Yeah.
Oh, let's hope for 2022, everyone.
Keeping our fingers crossed
for 2022. So thank you very much. This was fantastic. Val, I loved what you talked about right off the bat. You mentioned culture and how you put your kind of stake in the ground and get the team to buy in. It kind of reminds me of one of my favorite books on leadership, is John Wooden's book, and the Hall of Fame college basketball coach. Right from the jump, when you came onto campus at UCLA, he set the culture for what it was meant to be on the UCLA basketball team. The importance of practice, the importance of buying into team, which made then the game that much easier. And it sounds like you have that same approach to your leadership style, and I think that's just wonderful. So thank you so much. And I love that you have now publicly said that Brand Innovators can now have a Mind Day, and I'm going to be letting the whole company take off on Fridays for now, every other Friday from now on. So
all right, but you have to brand them Headspace days.
They are Headspace days.
Good move, Matt.
Everyone must download the app if they don't have it on their phone to prove the ability to take the day off.
Perfect.
Paul, thank you so much for being a great partner and driving the conversation with us today. Without